everybody, it's Mrs. Benson. Today I'm going to be reading Chameleons Are Cool by Martin Jenkins and illustrated by Sue Shields. This is a non-fiction book and it's all about chameleons, which I think are really cool. Look at that, they're cool. Some lizards eat bananas. Chameleons don't. Some lizards walk upside down on the ceiling. Chameleons can't. There's even a lizard that glides from tree to tree. A chameleon certainly wouldn't do that. And you can see here that the gecko's toes are sticky as Velcro, so he hangs upside down. And then here's another one that flies, and that's a flying lizard as he glides on wing-like flaps of skin. And lastly, iguanas eat bananas, and they don't just eat bananas, they love all sorts of fruits. But of all the different kinds of lizards, I still think chameleons are the best. Chameleons are cool. It's not that they're all that big. The biggest is only about the size of a rather small cat. That's pretty big, guys. It's called an ocelot's chameleon, and it lives in Madagascar. Whatever their size, chameleons usually get sick and die. If kept as pets, they're much better off in the wild. Interesting. They can be really, really small though. The smallest one could bounce happily on your little finger. It's called the dwarf brokesia, and lives in Madagascar too. And I suppose you wouldn't exactly call many of them beautiful. Their skin is wrinkly and bumpy, and they've got big bulgy eyes, while lots of them have the most ridiculous, oh, wonder what it is, noses! I think that their noses I like the best. And look at all their funny noses. They've got like sticky out ones, they've got horns. Oh, this one's really, really long. They've got funny looking eyes too. Their mouths are pretty odd too. They turn down at the corners, which is why chameleons always look grumpy. Actually, they don't look grumpy. They are grumpy. So if two chameleons bump into each other, things can get pretty lively. There's lots of puffing and hissing, and sometimes there's a real fight. And that's when the chameleons do what they're most famous for. They change color. It says a chameleon will fight only the same kind of chameleon as itself. That's interesting. Lots of people think chameleons change color to match their surroundings. They don't. They change color when they're angry, or when they're too cold or too hot, or when they're sick. And there are some sorts of chameleons that hardly change color at all. I didn't know that. I thought they change colors so they blend in with their surroundings. As a rule though, chameleons don't bump into one another all that often. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to call them lazy, but they certainly don't move any more than they have to. And when they do, it's almost always incredibly slow. And it says a chameleon's feet are shaped like pincers for holding onto the branches tightly. Sometimes they stop completely in mid-step, as if they have forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. But if you look closely, you'll see that they've actually carefully peering about. Now, peering about is something chameleons are rather good at. That's because their eyes can move separately from each other, unlike our eyes, which are always moved together. And it says most of chameleon's eyes is covered in skin, like the rest of its body. And you can see, like, they just have a tiny little piece of eye sticking out. And it says there's a tiny peephole in the middle of that chameleon where it sees through. So while one eye is looking back over the chameleon's shoulders, the other one is scanning the branches ahead. As soon as it spots something tasty, the chameleon fixes both eyes on its prey and begins to creep forwards, even more slowly than usual. Then it opens its mouth just a crack and thwap! Out shoots this amazingly long tongue with a sticky tip at the end, like a piece of well-chewed chewing gum. And then if you look at the chameleon's feet, you can see they're really stuck to those branches and it's holding on tight while it's getting that grasshopper. And it says chameleons feed on all sorts of creepy crawlies. The big ones also eat small birds, mice, and even other chameleons. Then the tongue flies back, and there's a lot of chomping and chewing, and perhaps a few bits of insect leg fluttering to the ground. And after that, chameleon just sits there for an hour or two, doing nothing very much at all, looking quite exhausted and still grumpy after all that hard work. And the caption says most lizards gulp their food down without chewing it, but chameleons grind everything up thoroughly. Wow, it must be a lot of work to eat a bug. I know I'm tired after eating. And there you have it. How could you possibly resist a pocket-sized, bad temper, color-changing, swivel-eyed, snail-paced, long-tongued sharpshooter? If chameleons aren't cool, then I don't know what is. And that is the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe one day you'll see a real chameleon.